Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Good to see everyone. It's been a while, but I'm back. Welcome everyone in the chat and any moderators and channel members out there, and to anyone that's listening to the replay. Thanks for joining us. And if you're listening on the audio only, welcome. If you're watching on YouTube or X, be sure to follow the audio only on any and all podcast platforms. I'm currently in the middle of working on my latest documentary called Psychic Agent. Filming should be wrapping up on that soon, but in the meantime, be sure to watch my documentary, A Clockwork Shining, on Tubi for free. Even if you've seen it already, it really helps us continue to create amazing and informative documentaries. And me and Jay Widener have plans to make other titles, maybe even sequels in the future. So, with that down, we have with us today here to talk with us about Halloween and the true meaning of it, just in time for spooky holiday season. I'm all dressed up in my Halloween getup. He is the host of The Secret Teachings, author, researcher, veteran radio host, good friend of mine, Ryan Gable. Welcome back to the show. How's it going, my friend?
Howdy, buddy. It's going good. I'm glad to be back on Raised by Giants.
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've done a show. It's been like over a month now. Been on this documentary, doing my thing.
How's it going? How's the documentary going?
It's going really good. I got a few other things to film for it and a few other interviews, and then it's just editing time. Editing.
The editing is the worst part. Well, some people like editing, but I think it's the worst part.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I actually really enjoy it, but sometimes, bro, it gets to the point where you're like, oh my god, dude, I just want to freaking bang my head against the wall or something. It gets overwhelming at times, but I like the problem solving aspect of it because I'm a problem solver.
Yes.
That's what I like the most about it. But man, I've missed a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff has happened. I know the show is about Halloween and we're definitely going to talk about Halloween, but holy crap, I've missed a lot. Charlie Kirk assassination, government shutdown.
You didn't even cover that, huh?
Nope. Didn't cover it. Amazon cloud server went down, which then shut down half the internet. Like,
see, I didn't even hear about that.
You didn't hear about that? Yeah. So the Amazon cloud server went down, and like half the internet was like then shut down. It's so strange.
I'm so burned out with much of this stuff that I have just tried to focus on my specialty: history, myth, symbolism, stuff like that.
Yeah, that seems to be the thing to kind of, and I'm actually lucky that I skipped over a lot of this stuff because it's just like it's just over and over and over again, same stuff. But yeah, that happened, which seems like it would be a really big problem. That if one company like runs all the servers for like half the internet,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of strange. And then we got the government shutdown and all that, which is kind of crazy too, because well, at least in my area, active duty military is not getting paid, which has only happened one other time in the history of the United States, which was in 2019.
I wonder if the IRS still gets paid.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
I'm sure there's a bunch of different government branches that still make money, still get paid.
But does that not seem like a huge problem, Ryan? If the government is not in operation, then the military essentially falls apart. I see that as a big issue.
I haven't put much thought into the recent shutdown, but I have considered how I think I've heard other people talk about this too. Obviously, you don't need that big of a government because your lives proceed onward. Each day the government is, quote, shut down. But then again, what is the definition of shut down? Because as you just said, the military might not be getting paid, but I'm sure that there are some people in the military getting paid. I'm sure that checks to defense contractors are still being cashed. I'm sure that there's some generals still making some money. It's probably the low-level average soldier who doesn't get paid, but I'm sure the generals make money. I'm sure the high-level people and the companies that they work with to make weapons, I'm sure that they all still get paid. I would have very little trust in anybody who suggests otherwise. I'm sure the money still moves. So
Well, that's the thing about it is that the money for all the military services are allocated at the beginning of every single year. The budget. It's already
Yes.
budgeted out at the beginning of every year. So where's the money? Why aren't they getting paid? You know, that's something that no one's really brought up, and I'm sure it has something to do with congressional things, like they had the money, but it wasn't there in time or whatever the excuse is, but it's allocated for every single military service at the beginning of every year, so it's kinda weird that only within how long has it been since the government shut down? Like, less than a month? It's coming up on a month here soon that the active duty military isn't getting paid. I mean, NASA laid off, like, what? I mean, not lit furloughed NASA furloughed, like, 19,000 employees just 2 days after the government shut down.
Mhm.
So it's like, are all these institutions, like, bankrupt? Do they not have any money in reserve in case something like this happens? You would think that the military in the United States would have enough money in reserve, but it's so weird that because based off of that logic, if some active duty military are not currently getting paid, NASA has to furlough all of these people. A lot of these government contractors and people are getting furloughed. That means that these companies and organizations are only existing from month to month.
I think a lot of it is simply politics, and I think it's gross and disgusting on both sides.
That seems to be a really big chink in the armor, though. Like, if you can't go over a month without furloughing a crap ton of employees for your military and then not paying active duty soldiers, that seems to be a really big problem and a really big issue. But with Halloween approaching this week, let's peel back those layers because with every holiday, pretty much there seems to be the public's perception of what that holiday is, and then there's the hidden meaning or the true meaning, if you will, as um, as far as I can tell, most look at like Halloween as the reason to dress up. I mean, I'm dressed up right now, but to go out and get candy, which is fun. Other, fundamentalist Christians believe that it's, satanic. And I don't know if you're familiar with this quote, but it's from Anton LaVey, which everyone should know who Anton LaVey is. He was the head of the Church of Satan. But he had this quote. I think it's been misquoted and there's been different variations of the quote, but it essentially goes something like, I'm glad that parents let their children worship the devil at least one night out of the year. Are you familiar with that quote?
Very familiar with that quote, right? Yes.
Yeah, so what's the origin of this holiday, Ryan?
So I have a couple of thoughts. One, we should note that there have been countless times throughout history, both in the United States and in other countries, where soldiers were not getting paid. This is not an abnormal or uncommon thing. But in regard to Halloween and the history of Halloween, yes, I've first heard that quote many, many times. And that quote, like so many other Anton LaVey quotes, are usually taken out of context.
Right.
Kind of like when Leo Zagami, who I've been friends with for a long time, Leo Zagami, who I know you've met too, he joked one time, I think it was on a YouTube video, he joked one time, he said something like, "I am Satan." And then, of course, people are messaging me, "He just admitted that he worships the devil." And there's no context for a joke, or like Candace Owens recently was talking about how Sam Altman and Peter Thiel, and she mentioned maybe Bill Gates or somebody else, but she mentioned how a lot of these tech people, Elon Musk, I think was the other one, how they kind of don't act human, and there's something in their eyes. They don't really seem like they're human. Maybe they're possessed by something. And I think she was approaching that from a Catholic demonic possession, exorcism idea. But anyway, the point is when she said that, people take that little clip and she's totally crazy. She believes what David Icke believes now. And if you don't understand what monologuing is, that's what Candace Owens was doing. So it's like that with what Leo Zagami said, or many times on the show, I've joked around and said on my own show, I've said, I'm a witch. I have spices in my kitchen, and I tend to use herbal remedies for things. That's the definition of witchcraft. And then people think that I'm like a witch, or if I say, well, I'm not a Christian, just to confirm that my point of view is not skewed in the Christian direction, then people think he's a witch who rejects Christ. It's that kind of silly thing. And I don't like Anton LaVey. I don't really hate him either. I'm kind of neutral on the subject. I'm not a fan of his work. But if you listen to interviews with him where they're in context, he'll say things. One of my favorite clips of LaVey is when he's talking about why they surround themselves with what we would maybe call the symbols of Halloween, skulls, skeletons, etc., because he says they're memento mori. They are reminders that we will die. And that's really part of what Halloween's about. That quote had nothing to do with Halloween, but he said in an interview that the symbols represent a reminder that you will die, which is not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing. It's just a fact. You will die. And when you die, hopefully you left behind something that was beneficial to everybody else, that you raised your kids right, or you contributed to society in some positive, uplifting, upbuilding way. And that's kind of the problem with the visuals of Halloween, is that people see skeletons and think that everybody worships death. People misinterpret what Diwali is, for example. You've been out of the loop, you said, so I'm not sure if you saw me post my shows on Diwali. They were about other things too, but I mentioned Diwali on one of my shows because, of course, Donald Trump lit some candles in the White House, and that was considered a demonic ritual and satanic and evil, and he's not really a Christian. And I thought, well, that's bizarre considering how much attention he's given Israel, and people don't seem to have an issue with that. But he lit a candle, and that means he's abandoned Jesus. So that part confused me. And it's literally a candle. That's what Diwali is. It's literally about lighting candles. The word Diwali it originates in Sanskrit, I believe, and it translates directly to row of lights, which means that when you put lights on your house for Christmas, I guess people still do that, put lights on your house for Christmas, the definition of that in a very ancient language called Sanskrit is Diwali. So you did Diwali on your house. And watching people get angry and think that that's devil worship and that's evil is it's not just a bizarre thing. I mean, I could be sarcastic, which I am, and I could kind of laugh at it and think, well, that's kind of funny that people still think that. It's sad, it's kind of funny. I'm confused on the emotions of what to think about it, but ultimately it's actually terrifying. I think it's terrifying. I did a show actually called Jesus is the Reason for the Treason. And I suggested that whatever this, I'm not sure what to call it, Ryder, frankly, but whatever this growing Christian nationalist movement is, and anytime you critique it, of course, people say, well, that's a different version of Christianity. They're Catholics, or they're Baptists, or they're this, or okay, whatever. But there's a growing Christian movement, and I'm not opposed to that. I think that that's in many ways a positive thing. But if that growing Christian movement is, and this is a different subject, but if that growing Christian movement is being used as a form of propaganda to encourage people to support a foreign country or to back wars that seem to appear like Armageddon, and that's all part of at least one interpretation of random biblical verses and the eschatological narrative, I mean, that's dangerous. And that means our politicians and our quote leaders are willing to sell out their own people, are willing to discard the rule of law, are willing to allow the republic to fall simply because of some religious belief system. And that's extremely dangerous. And it's doubly dangerous when you have, I again don't know what to call them. I'd say people on the political right who are now doing exactly what the political left did. Now we have people on the political right calling for the banning of Islam, calling for the banning of prayer, like Muslims should not be allowed to pray. And I get, yeah, not in the middle of the road, although that isn't actually really happening much in reality. But people wanting Muslims to not be able to pray at all, people wanting mosques to be shut down, people wanting to ban Islam as a religion. And there's a very aggressive and nasty and vile foreign element which is pushing this, and a domestic one. But the point is, it doesn't matter what you think about Islam, or certainly I'm not a Muslim and it doesn't matter what I think. But if you can argue that, and you have a right to argue that, it's a stupid thing to argue, because if you can argue that, well, then the next person who takes power who isn't a Christian nationalist will just argue to ban your religion. You're setting a very, very dangerous precedent, and you're also doing something that is completely contrary to the foundational First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So all of that is, it might sound unrelated to Halloween, but it's really important, I think, because if you don't understand that Diwali means light bulbs and candles and literal fire from like a Bic lighter, this is 2025. People should be aware of this by now, and knowing that means that, well, you're not going to be really angry and calling for the banning of Hinduism, because there's a movement now to do that. That's grown over the last couple of weeks because the president lit some candles in the White House. And so all of that, whatever that is, I don't know what it is. Fundamentalism, I don't think it's all fundamentalism. It's a mixture of different things. It's also a mixture of propaganda and just vile hatred and political identities, and just people fighting over nonsense. Ultimately, though, what I'm getting at here is the reason that Halloween is viewed the way that it is because of those attitudes and those ideas, those mindsets, those perceptions, because of religious, points of view that vary per person. So you go back to what Anton LaVey said, and he says, this is memento mori. This is a reminder that we'll die and that we should do good in life. And maybe your definition of good is different than his. Again, I don't really like Anton LaVey. I'm just saying that one line that you asked the question about, the quote, one line taken out of context is not proof of anything. And yet I've also seen that quote. I even played a clip of somebody saying that on my show the other night. That quote is being used as proof that Halloween is a satanic holiday. And then on top of that, one of the clips that I played on my show, and there's a whole bunch of them that are being shared by right-wing influencers, people are using this new talking point. I don't know if you've heard this. The new talking, and this is not a joke, the new talking point is Halloween is a Christian holiday. And there's at least one main Catholic guy on TikTok who says that Halloween has always been a Christian holiday, and that sometime in the 1890s, I think was the date he gave, that's the first time that we started calling it a pagan holiday. So it was always Christian, but we have pagans today that have tried to co-opt Christianity, which is like a profound inversion of reality and profound gaslighting of
Yeah, that's a total inversion of what happened. Like
yes,
the Celtic religion that was like that they celebrated the end to mark the end of harvest and the beginning
yes,
of the dark half of the year, which is fall. Which then you get into what is fall. Fall is fall of man, right? And the Celtics believe that the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest on October 31st, right? And spirits and ancestors could cross over, and people would light bonfires and wore disguises, which then gets into your whole candle lighting thing as well, because the lighting of a candle is actually to ward off harmful spirits. They
yes,
would then they would just, give offerings to the dead. I mean, that's the real foundation of Halloween. And when Christianity spread through the Celtic regions at the beginning of, like, I think it's like the 8th century, like around 701 AD, the church didn't get rid of the holiday. They just completely rebranded it, right? They rebranded the entire holiday. They called it All Saints Day, which was November 1st. And then the day before that was All Hallows Day. So the All Hallows Eve, which then became Halloween, right? Just like the church did to Christmas, which was traditionally a pagan Celtic holiday. They then converted it, renamed it, and rebranded it. But really quickly before I let you go on that, Gnarly Sheen is in the chat here, and he's actually the one that sent me this robe that I'm currently wearing.
You look like a druid.
That's why I'm wearing it, bro. Celtic. Let me light my candle, bro. Ward off them evil spirits. But he's the one that sent me this robe for me to wear at Contact in the Desert. He sent me this last year.
And why didn't I get a robe, Gnarly? Send Ryder a robe. It's a lot more fabric than me. He's much taller than I am. It's more expensive.
I think it was pretty expensive for this. This is like an XXL large robe, dude. It's a huge robe because I'm super tall, but he wore it so I could be Ashtar Galactic Command from the fifth half dimension of Nickelback 3/4.
The Emerald Alliance, yes.
Because I would look exactly like Ashtar, Lord Ashtar, because everyone knows what Lord Ashtar looks like. They would be like, "Oh my God, is that Lord Ashtar?" And then
I think you've got a facial structure. You could do like a like you need some like blue paint. I've seen Ashtar command people wearing blue paints. Put some like blue war paint above your eyebrows and maybe like an arrow, like Avatar, or is it Avatar? No, the Last Airbender. I'm sorry, something like that. I think you'd look really good in that. You could definitely take some people's money.
Yeah. I was charging $300 for a good old healing session.
333.
333, baby. But yeah, thank you, Gnarly Sheen. Appreciate you, brother. Good to see you. And yeah, he actually sent me this from listening to one of the shows that we did together on your channel. And then he hit me up.
Oh, really nice.
I'm gonna send you a robe, bro. Let's do it. I'll wear it. I'll wear it to Contact, but I didn't end up getting to make it to Contact this year.
We're going next year, even if they won't give me a ticket. We're going. I'm going to fly in, and we're just going to crash it. Not in a bad way, for the record. Just I'm gonna be there.
I've just been. I don't really want to talk about it. It's just turned into something that I don't think that it was ever meant to be, which is the entire scope of ufology. It's like AI now. Like it's all people talk about. AI. Like, but anyway, what did you think about those statements that I made about the Celtic religion and it being a Celtic holiday? Was that pretty close to what you have researched?
Yeah, it's quite accurate. I mean, obviously, people would, someone who might know a little bit more would say, "Well, that's not exactly what it's all about." And yeah, you're right, but Ryder's pretty much on point, as they say. That's pretty accurate. I can't really tell you. I don't think anybody can really tell you for sure where everything came from, but we have some pretty good ideas. And our modern American Halloween largely came from the Irish, the mid 1800s, largely. But by the time that the Irish came here, most of the traditions that they had, English too, but most of the traditions the Irish had, or Scots, but mostly Irish, were already hundreds of years. I want to say devolved, but I don't think that's the right word. We could actually just say evolved. They were evolved, maybe devolved from their original purpose, but evolved into more modern versions. They'd already evolved, that was the point, because the Celtic peoples go back to, I think the only really old archaeological site on record is about 700 BC. I think that's the official one, 700 BC, the official number. But the Celtic culture goes back about 1500 BC. Some argue it goes back to 3000 BC. Either way, it is hundreds and it is thousands ultimately of years older than Christianity. And most of the ideas that the Celtic peoples and the Druids in particular had, and many of their rituals and symbols, are universal. They're universal in every culture because they all come from the natural world around us. I mean, if you were to look in the Scandinavian countries, for example, you have frost giants. You don't have those if you looked at like the American Southwest native tribes. They don't have frost giants because they live in deserts. Other than things like that, pretty much the same idea. And as a matter of fact, you find swastikas, or Asia, they call it the manji in China. But you find that actually in Northern Europe, and you find that also in the American Southwest because I think they call that the whirling log. I think that's Navajo, but most native tribes have the same symbol. Medicine men use it. It's a healing symbol. All of it represents the actual physical sun, because the sun turns and moves in the sky. I think in Germany they call it Sonnenrad. Is that German for the sun wheel? And that's basically a swastika that's more so turned into a circle, or it's like a circle with a cross, and then they kind of erase a little bit of the line so it looks like it's turning. Which is why you would see, if you look at Egyptian iconography, for example, there's two different examples of this, of the sun moving. You either have the sun with little feet, and there's a serpent, which is, you could say, creation, or there's a serpent, which you could say is the darkness that eats the sun every night, and then during an eclipse too. There's usually a serpent around the sun, and then the serpent has little feet. And so basically what's happening is it's walking. And this is a pretty universal image too. You see this in Africa, you see this in the Americas. As a matter of fact, I think in the Mississippi Valley, there's maybe descriptions or myths that are similar to this. The Mississippi Valley region actually has very similar, and so does Central and South America, very similar underworld imagery to Africa on top of that, and mythology on top of that. That's a whole nother show. Pretty fascinating. But the point is, the serpent walks or the sun walks. The other image is the most famous, probably, which we've talked about with ufology before. It's the solar disk with wings, and the sun flies, or the sun walks or runs or turns. It's all describing the same thing. I think it's probably overstating the obvious to give additional examples, but it's all talking about the same thing. However, it's important to understand that there's a blending of different ideas. So it's not just the sun, which I think some people who want to discredit religion intentionally or unintentionally will rely heavily on the argument that it's just solar worship. And it is to an extent, but it's also vegetation worship. It's also sex worship, so phallic or yonic worship. And for people that are very religious, I mean, 60% we can estimate of your audience is probably Christian. That's about the average in the United States. Just look at the cathedrals, even just look at standard churches, some of them, but older churches. But cathedrals all over Europe have all this imagery. You could pull it's. I don't know. I don't think it would be inappropriate on YouTube, but there's certain symbols on churches you could look up in Europe that are extremely explicit, like it's a woman just holding her vagina open, and those are on churches. The church itself, the Gothic cathedral, is built like a womb. I mean, if you look at Notre Dame, which means Our Lady, I know people will say, but that's Catholicism. That's different than regular Christianity. Well, not really. It's all the same. All the Christian Renaissance art is Jesus coming through this oval opening, this little Vesica Piscis opening. And that as I was referencing the Mississippi Valley cultures and Africa, that little Vesica Piscis is known as it's like a slit in the sky, as much as it is as an actual woman. It's a slit in the sky, which is in Egypt Nut. It is a woman, so I guess there's a relationship to the woman as well in the sky, the woman of the sky, and you go through that little slit. It's in the wrist of Orion, so Orion's belt, or they call it the wrist of Orion. So it's not just the belt, but the three stars that go. It's like a bracelet in the Americas. It's more so a belt in Egypt. But right there in that belt is where there's a slit, and you go through that slit, and that's where the Milky Way is. That's where the River of Souls are. That's where the Mississippi River would be that connects to the Milky Way in the sky. That's where the Nile River connects to the Milky Way in the sky. And there is a certain time of the year when the spirits, the people that die, cross over into that other world. And that time frame is roughly from October, November into March, which is the time frame of our fall and our winter months. So when you read about how the souls of the dead are resurrected in the end times, well, that's what's happening. The souls of the dead are resurrected in the end times. It's not the end times of the whole world in a physical, material sense. It's the end times of the year. The dead are roaming the earth, they pass through that slit in the sky and they go into the other world. And in order to help the spirits so they don't get trapped or caught or lost, you have candles lit, you have fires that are burning to both warm and to guide the souls so they don't get stuck in a sort of purgatory state. And since that opening is more easily accessible, and as you said, the veil is thinned, then yes, things from the other side can cross over, and they might be mischievous, they might not be. But what those things ultimately represent, rather than looking at them like some people say gargoyles and demons and they're fairies and like these are all totally different creatures. Like gnomes are earth spirits, and fairies are they're kind of etheric. They're sort of interdimensional. They're sort of airy, sort of like sylphs in a way, which is the air spirit. And that's totally different than a demon. Demons are, if you know the name of the demon, you can control it. If you know the name of the fairy, it's going to piss it off. You don't call fairies by their names. You have to call them the good people or the good neighbors. Totally different than demons, completely separate entities. But what those ultimately, those things ultimately are, in the same way that a demon from the Greek daemon is essentially, it's you, and it's also disease. So we say we exorcise demons, but we also exorcise demons. You know, the first diseases were largely thought to be caused by spirit possession. And this is a pretty universal idea. So one of the ways that you get rid of unclean, impure spirits is by playing music, performing some sort of exorcism, which is not a strictly Catholic thing. The samurai practiced exorcisms in Japan. So this is not a strictly Catholic thing, for the record, or a strictly religious Christian thing. I mean, the Muslims exorcise jinn. So it's a pretty universal idea. The Celtic peoples did too. They just had a different name for those demons or those evil spirits. But in the same way that's what a demon is, a fairy or these other creatures that might come from the other side really are, the best way I can explain it is to think about it from the point of view of someone who doesn't have central air, someone who doesn't have access to a phone or the internet. You can't go down to Giant Eagle or Kroger or Walmart. You can't go to a restaurant and get food.
They were living way different back then, bro.
You're living way different, right? So, I mean, even if you do, we all live in the modern world. Even if you're kind of aware of this, even if you live in a nice house, I mean, the wind, if you get a big storm that comes through, the wind still might rattle your windows. If you live in an old house, you get the creaks, you get the windows rattling when the wind blows. You live in an old house or something like that. That's really what these spirits are. It's the wind. It's, you know, the sound of the storm. That's always been the nighttime rides, especially during Christmas time, the nighttime rides of the gods and the goddesses, the wild hunt. Usually it's hunting for a boar, because a boar is the animal that represents the fall of man into the winter. In some parts of the world, it kills Attis, who's basically the solar savior. The boar represents the fall into the winter, so they would chase the boar down. And this all of it is metaphoric, all of it is allegoric. It's weird to me, just as a side note, it's weird to me that people will read the Bible and read that Jesus says, I'm speaking in parables. This is not literal. And then people interpret it as literal. It's like it is exclusively stated that it's not to be interpreted literally. And neither are the myths. And I heard in fact the same video I played on my show where this woman referenced the Anton LaVey clip. She had a little segment on myths and said myths can't be trusted. They're just fake, false gods. And again, it's so wild that it's 2025, and it's not like Joseph Campbell never existed. It's not like Carl Jung never existed. I mean, these are two of the smartest guys, at least in modern history. Things that are, you know, respected enough that they're in, you could, like, even mainline college courses, you could even take this. I mean, it's in pop culture. Campbell was the inspiration for Star Wars, and yet we still look at this stuff as literal, or we dismiss it as like, you can't trust the myths. Well, nobody says that. Well, I don't think. Hopefully, they don't think that Thor is a real god. He's just a symbolic representation of nature. I mean, you know this, Ryder, and I think a lot of your listeners know this, but it's a really frustrating thing when you're trying to explain to people what you alluded to earlier. It's the fall of man. Spirits are roaming free. That's the resurrection of the dead. We know in Greek that apocalypse means the lifting of the veil. That's the same veil you lift when you get married. That's the same veil that Isis is covered with. And interestingly, I experienced this firsthand. I've never seen anybody else bring this up. So I thought I stumbled on something pretty cool. When I went to the Ise Jingu Shrine, which is the main shrine of the sun goddess in Japan, their primary deity, they have a white veil guarding her inner sanctum. It's identical to the veil of Isis, because Isis, or Amaterasu, is nature, and the veil is what separates us from the spirit world, or the world that animates this physical reality. And like the inscription of what they call the static Isis, you could look this up. Manly Hall has a really good depiction of it in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. But it's the static Isis. You look it up and it'll say, it's a very famous description, very famous depiction too. And it says, I am all that ever has been, ever will be, or is all that, what is the exact quote? I am everything that is, has been, and ever will be. The fruit that I brought forth is the sun. And if you look at the breasts of Isis, she has wheat and grapes, because her body and her blood, or her fluids, are the redeeming things. Those redeeming things are what we get from the bounty of nature after 9 months, when the earth gives birth and we have this harvest festival season. And you have a last supper before the end of the year. The sign of the end times are when the leaves start changing colors. The pale horse that rides after the black horse is known as the rider who brings death. And that death is the winter. Cold, dark, it snows a lot, so the sound gets trapped and you don't really hear anything. You get like an Oz factor. Everything goes quiet. So nature is quite literally dead. The earth is literally dead. And when that happens, well, that's the end of the world. But it's okay, because God comes back and saves us, right? He comes back in around Easter time, which is when the Celts also celebrated the resurrection of their Savior. They also, for anybody who has never heard this before, I'd assume some of your listeners have probably heard me do shows on this recently, so it might sound repetitive, but it's really important to point out that the Celtic peoples, the Druids in particular, they believed in an omnipotent God. They believed in a Madonna and child. They believed in the power of the cross, and they made crosses out of oak tree branches. They also believed in the power of the Savior. They believed in the power of the Trinity. They believed in the power of salvation through being able to be forgiven for, they didn't call them sins, but essentially be forgiven for their sins and then have salvation, which is also, linked to nature. So you have, it's more than just a singular spiritual thing of the self. It's also linked to the external world. But they believed also, on top of that, in a heaven, a hell, and a purgatory. And purgatory is that middle state where the spirits are roaming. They believed in all those things 1,000 years. Base minimum, if you're going to be super, super conservative about it, 1,000 years before Christ. That doesn't disprove Christ. This is a problem that we have. It actually proves that what Jesus Christ, which is a title, the name would have been Yeshua, and Christ is a title that applies to anybody who's been anointed, including Egyptian pharaohs, the Messa of the fat of the crocodile from the Nile, the Messa, Messiah. What is happening is and Jesus says this all throughout the Bible. It's astounding. It's in the book of John. It's in the book of Matthew. I'll give you an example. When Jesus says in the book of Matthew, he's talking to the Pharisees. I might have told you about this before, Ryder, or maybe you've read this before, but when he's talking to the Pharisees and they're charging him and accusing him of all these horrible things, the high priest says to him, I charge you under the oath by the living God, tell us you are the Messiah, you are the Son of God. And Jesus says to him in rejection of that statement, well, you said that, but what I'm telling you is actually the Son of Man can sit at the right hand of the Mighty One coming in the clouds of heaven. In other words, you're accusing me of being the literal Son of God. I'm not the literal Son of God. This is actually confirmed several times in the Bible. It's shocking considering that I grew up with the Bible and nobody bothered to point this out to me. But what Jesus is talking about is that this is an internal thing. In the book of Luke, you read about how the kingdom of God is inside of you, right? The kingdom of heaven is inside of you. We read something very similar to this in the book of John, the book of First John. We read this additionally, I believe, in the book of Matthew, where Jesus separates the Father from the Son. The Son is you. It's the soul. And the true soul, what makes you you, but the soul also in English would be, in Latin, would be the soul, as in the Son as well. So soul, soul. And the seat of the Son in the body is the heart. So you allow Jesus to come into your heart. Jesus was probably a real person. And Jesus was probably disliked by very powerful people who he preached against because he said, we don't need these institutions. You don't need a place with a Sanhedrin to tell you how to live your lives. And this is important to understand because even though it might seem like it's unrelated to Halloween, it's a very critical and crucial component of Halloween. I don't want to ramble on too much. I can explain why that is if you'd like, unless you have questions.
Well, what you were talking about is really spot on with the metaphors and the allegories. I mean, I've been trying to tell people that for so long. And even when you look at, like, virgin, what does virgin mean? Virgin just means that you're clean. That's all that it means. So you can literally go take a shower and you're
Virgin.
technically a virgin, right?
Yep. A
You can
baby's
say-
born as a virgin.
But what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Well, and then when you look at, like, baptisms as well, right? You're clean in within the Holy Spirit, right? Your soul has been cleaned, right? It's the exact same thing. It's what it means. That's what virgin means. And it doesn't mean that you've never had sex before. It just means that you're clean. You're a clean vessel, right?
Yes, yes.
How many people had access to showers back then? I mean, or a bath, or they probably went months and months and months and months without bathing because they probably didn't have access to be able to bathe. And that's another point that you bring up too, is like, if you were just plunged into back, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, and you were just out in the elements all the time, you would begin to worship the elements, because if you're in the dead of winter, everything's cold, the crops don't grow, everything. Would it not cross your mind at some point, like, what if this never ends? What if the winter never ends?
Yes, exactly. And imagine having a year where the winter goes on for another 2 or 3 weeks.
You would be like, what is happening? What's going on? Why is it lasting way longer? Is it going to last forever? And then the scuttlebutt around the town will be, oh, I've heard that this is the way it's going to be like forever. It's going to be.
I felt that one the first year I lived in Rochester, New York, and it was like March, third week of March, and it's still snowing. And I'm looking at the weather online, and it says it's going to snow again in April. And then like we get to May 1st, and it's still cold. I mean, that was like 2020 or something, roughly that time, or maybe maybe it was earlier than that, 2018 or something. I was living there. But I mean, that terrified me. And that's in the modern day. I hate the cold. I can't imagine what it would be like living in a world where you don't have any of these modern things that we have.
And then we kind of already live under a veil already, Ryan. Like we are in the veil right now. We are in our homes. We go to the grocery store to get our food. We don't have to, kill animal. Well, I mean, we do kill animals, but we personally don't kill animals. We're not out there really hunting for our food anymore. We're not scavenging. We're not going out and getting berries to make it through the winter. You know what I mean? We're not in that type of environment. So we have that disconnect between the way that they did things back then and the way that we do things now. And then we're trying to interpret things that were happening back then when we have no idea what it was like back then. So we don't even understand the context
Yes.
of what was going on back then because we can't even put ourselves in that type of situation because it's so far removed from us because we have all of these conveniences around us 24/7. I mean, we can get our groceries delivered to our house if we want. We can sit down and put on a streaming service and watch a brand new movie that's in the theater. We can get our coffee delivered to us in the morning if we wanted to. You know, we have all these luxuries, and they didn't have that back then. So the way that they operated and the way that they did things had to have been dramatically
You
different.
you would see the world in a totally different way. I mean, you can just see that today. I mean, that's why when you travel to certain countries, not Europe, of course, but if you traveled to well, if you came over here to Japan, I mean, there's a lot of things here that are catering to Westerners and people that speak English, but you would definitely, maybe not you, Ryder, but most people would definitely have an absolute culture shock and might not know how to really process what's going on. Not that it's going to cripple you and you can't enjoy your vacation, but you're probably going to have a couple of moments during that vacation when you're looking around thinking, what is happening? I've never seen this, thought about this. How do these people live this way? This is better. This is weird. This is worse. Just that kind of culture shock. And the reason for that is because we all have different cultures. And, over here, they've been isolated compared to the rest of the world for quite a long time. This modern development over here is the last, like, what, 200 years, if that. And you see that in the modern world. I can't imagine going back to 1500 BC. That's over 3,000 plus years ago. It's a completely different world. Even 100 years ago is a completely different world. You're right. That's a good point to make very, very clear. I also wanted to make an observation because I'm sure that correctly somebody listening would be wondering, since we're not taking calls or anything like that. Well, didn't the Druids perform human sacrifices? And the answer to that question is, yeah, they did. But what's the context of that? There's no context, just a human sacrifice. Okay, but there is actually context to it, and I'll explain what the context is. The context is, yes, the Druids performed human sacrifices. One, they didn't do it every day. Two, many of the stories of the Druids performing human sacrifices are a result of what foreigners wrote, largely Christian foreigners who wanted to discredit and demean and degrade and justify the replacement of the Druidic and the Celtic cultures. They're heathens. We should be able to replace them with the word of God. Also, the third thing is when they did kill somebody, what they were doing was not just killing a random person from a village. They were usually killing someone from another tribe who had committed a crime or someone who maybe had raped somebody or had stolen something. They executed criminals. And if anybody thinks that that is horrific, I point you to what the current Trump administration or what the previous Obama administration did with drones. People are literally on social media being like, yeah, blow up those drug boats. And I'm not going to even give my opinion on it. I'm just saying, you're like, blow up those drug boats. And then the next post is, Halloween's a pagan holiday of people that killed people. I don't really see how, if you fast forwarded 3,500 years from now, Ryder, and for whatever the reason was, we had one fragment of history from today, and we just heard that this country called the former United States had a leader that would just blow up people's boats in the ocean as a human sacrifice. You might interpret it that way. So, and we have no context. We have no ability to really put ourselves into those positions to understand what was going on. But we do understand. We do know. We can understand that there's more to it than just human sacrifice. Yeah, but they were also criminals, and also they did it like once a year, and also that was a very short term practice. It was largely from an early point onward that they sacrificed animals or flowers or fruits or vegetables, which is a universal thing. The Mayans did too. And many of those stories are a result, and there's documents of this. There's plenty of writers. I could pull references later if you want to see them. I think I have them in my Occult Arcana book too. There's one reference to how, yeah, the Druids definitely killed people, like they perform human sacrifices, but how many do they actually perform? Because most of those accounts are coming from monks. Most of those accounts are coming from people that just looked at the Druids and were like, wait a minute, hold on a second. They also have a cross. They also have a son of God. Hold on a second. Their God also had an earthly mother who gave a virgin birth or had a virgin birth, and his father was the Father, the divine, because that's what the Celts believe. Their savior had a divine father and an earthly mother. And they looked around and were like, well, this is really similar to ours. So if we're going to replace this with Christianity, we have to justify it. And how do you justify it? The same way the military justifies killing people in any conflict. They're barbarians, they're rapists, they're killing babies. So that justifies it in people's minds. Well, we can kill them. It's okay to replace the Druids because they were killing people in their sacrifices. And our religion doesn't do that. We're better.
And then we just come in and rebrand the entire thing, take all of their belief systems, and then make them our own, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I look at it like if the Druids, let me make sure I got my references correct. If the Druids were, what's the name of the company in that movie Tommy Boy that his dad ran? If the Druids were that, and Dan Aykroyd were the Christians, and Callahan Auto Parts, they would just want the brand so they could just repackage it. That's basically what they did. They just repackaged it, and that's not an insult or a rejection of Christianity, because every religion does that. Christianity also rebranded part of Judaism. Islam rebranded Christianity in some ways, and most of them. This is another weird thing, Ryder. We don't need to get into the details necessarily, but it's weird to me. I don't know if it's like a Christian thing or if it's like an Israeli thing or what it is, but thinking that like the Abrahamic faiths are the only or the first religions, and thinking like the 10 commandments are first of all, the only commandments, but second of all, the first 10 commandments, like the Abrahamic faiths compared to like Vedic history are really, really young. Like the Vedic tradition, the Hindus, they go back 10 plus thousand years. They make Abraham.
Hinduism is the oldest religion.
In some form, yes, I think. Yeah, that, and the branches that came out of it, yeah, they're the oldest religion by far. I mean, it depends on how you define religion. Shamanism is like probably the onset of religion 10, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago. It might be older than that, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, it's weird that we think, well, the Abrahamic faiths, they're the first, and the 10 commandments are the first. Like, not at all. In fact, even just a few hundred years before the 10 commandments, you had the Code of Hammurabi, which was also based on an older code in ancient Sumer. So the 10 commandments are not a unique thing. They're not even a quote, Jewish thing or a Moses thing. I mean, they are those things, but they're also much older. And it's not that discredits them. It doesn't mean like, well, it's because there's an older one, so that means I should not follow the 10 commandments. I should go kill and steal and bear false witness because there's an older version. Like, that doesn't, who thinks like that? I don't know why people react like that. It means that you should still follow them, but there's an older version, and the people that hold on to these 10 commandments, you should just know that that's not the first version. I don't know. It's like if you bought a car and then another version of the car comes out next year, and then there were like 10 versions the years previous, new versions of the car, and people are like, I've got the newest car. They're like, but there's like a 97 model. No, I've got the newest one in 2011. It just doesn't make it. It's weird to me. It's something I've observed. It's very strange. I don't understand.
It's almost like they want an excuse to be good.
An excuse to be good?
Like an excuse to be good, right? Like, oh, well, if we didn't have Christianity, we didn't have these 10 commandments, if we didn't have the Bible, then everything would just be crazy. Everything would just be anarchy. Like, I would just be doing, if there's no meaning to this reality and there's no meaning to existence and Jesus wasn't real, then then I would just go and do whatever I want.
Yeah, there's definitely a
What?
little bit of that.
But that shit doesn't make any sense, bro.
So I have 2 comments. I have 2 comments on that. First of all, I saw this really funny comedian. Um, she's a Japanese comedian, and it just because I guess where I am, it popped up on my feed. She speaks English and she does a US tour too. And she was saying, because she's married to an American guy, she was saying that she said that her father-in-law, so her husband's dad, her father-in-law asked her, "You come from Japan. How do you guys know not to steal and kill each other? Well, how do you have such low crime rates if you don't have the Bible?" And she's
Mhm.
like, I looked at him and was like, "Did I?" She's like, I started thinking to myself, it would be really dangerous if my father-in-law couldn't find his Bible because that's the only thing stopping him from killing somebody. Just kind of made me think of what you're saying there. It's totally true. Like it's really crazy that that people have been conditioned to think, and I'm not rejecting the Bible. I'm just saying, if is that really the only thing holding people back from mass murder and drug use and raping people? I mean,
That's
I
what
guess
they make it seem like. They make it seem like that is the only thing that's keeping them good, which is just asinine, bro. It's like it's so ridiculous, and I really don't understand that logic
I think I have
whatsoever.
I think I have an answer, if I may. I
Yes,
think I
please try and explain it in the best way that you can because I'm kind of I don't even know how to explain it, but yes, please.
I don't think this is the answer. I think it's maybe an answer, and it goes a little bit like this. The collect my laughter, my thoughts here, because I'm trying to be trying to be serious. I think it has to do with the fact that when Christianity first began to blossom and develop, and it's essentially growing out of Judaism, right? It's an extension of Judaism. People that follow Christ, and Christ made it so we don't need to sacrifice animals anymore, which the Jews still to this day do because they don't recognize Jesus. There are Messianic Jews, but for the most part, even recently during Yom Kippur, they were still talking about, they sacrifice animals, preparing for the red heifer too. But Jesus said you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to, have the blood rituals or any of that. It's use water. So the Christians replaced blood with water. They adapted many of the Jewish traditions and beliefs and transform them into something else. But in the early days of Christianity, one of the biggest differences between Judaism and Christianity is exactly what Jesus was talking about in the book of Matthew, where Jesus says, "We don't need you anymore. We can find salvation in ourselves. We don't need the Pharisees anymore," which is why they demanded his head, and the Romans obliged. And that's a whole another thing we could talk about if you're interested. But the point is, the main difference was that the Jewish leadership said, "You have to follow us to obtain salvation." Jesus said, "That's BS. You don't have to follow the leadership of these people or any other people. You just have to follow in my footsteps. My footsteps are it's an internal transformative process. It's realizing you don't need an institution, you don't need the Sanhedrin. You can be saved by recognizing the true eternal self, the soul, the spirit, etc." In a nutshell, that's what it is. So, in other words, to put it really simple, the Jewish leadership said, "You can only be saved through us. And by the way, if you're not Jewish, get out. So nobody else has salvation except us. We're chosen, we're unique." The Christians, on the other hand, said, "You can be saved even if you're not Jewish." And some Jews converted to Christianity because of that. But early Christians said, "You can be saved no matter what you've done." And that's a good thing, but it's also not a great thing, because what kind of people ran to that cult? Murderers,
Worst of the
rapists,
worst.
the worst of the worst, who were like, "Wait a minute. I can just rape and kill and steal, and then you'll like wave something over my head or like touch me and I'll be healed, and I can just do it again." Granted, I'm sure there were super small numbers of people who thought that way. I'm just explaining it in kind of a humorous, tone. But that is who the church initially, or not even the church, that's who the early Christians attracted. And in the same way that there are people today who might have done something horrible, maybe they killed somebody, cold-blooded murder, and then later they find Jesus in prison, and then they get out of prison. They're covered in tattoos, but they look like a gangster, but now suddenly they wear a cross and they dress nice and they go to church and they look like they used to be a badass, but now they're the children of God. And that's what was happening then too. But because so many bad people were attracted to Christianity due to that fact, I don't know if this is the reason, but it might be why the later but the early church fathers started to sort of remold that idea so that Christianity became more like Judaism. So instead of the Jewish leaders saying, "You can't be saved unless you're one of us. If you're not one of us, get out. We condemn you. You're cattle." And the Christians initially saying, "Well, anybody can be saved," which is a good thing, but that attracted a lot of really bad people who might not have wanted to actually be saved. Um, might have meant they had a consciousness, but they didn't necessarily want to be permanently saved. What happened with the early church fathers, they said, well, and then the much later church, or rather, I should say the more recent church, they said, well, how about this? If you don't convert to Christianity, we'll kill you. Yeah, the Muslims did the same thing, but it's basically a transformation. It's a weird transformation of like, you have to be one of us to get salvation. Jesus says that's not true. You can be a Christian. He didn't say that, but that's the idea, right? You can be a Christian. You can be separate. And we accept Jews too. That's great. Want to convert. And then later it was like, well, you don't have to convert, but if you don't, not only are you not going to be saved, we'll kill you. So that might be just that little piece of history, and it's a small piece of history, admittedly, but that might explain away a little bit about what we're talking about here.
Bro, if your religion is the only thing that's keeping you civilized and keeping you from murdering people and raping people and stealing, like,
Yeah.
you need to go home and rethink your entire life, bro. You're not a good person.
Yeah, yeah, and
Not a
that's
good person, dude.
yeah, you're totally right, and that's I've had unfortunately, I've known a lot of well, not unfortunately, it's unfortunate they were in these situations, but unfortunately, I've known people throughout my life, mostly women, that are married to guys. Usually it's guys. They're usually and well, not I don't mean that in a homosexual way. I'm just saying it's usually women that are married to these types of guys. As I'm trying to preface my thoughts here. It's usually women married to these types of guys who are quote Christian, but they're like cheaters and wife beaters. But since they're Christian, it's like all is forgiven after they, rape their wife or after they beat their kids or something. And there's a lot of that in fundamentalist type churches because that's the kind of person I think Christians need to recognize this. That's the kind of person that's attracted to the cult. It's vulnerable people that are, like a traditionalist Christian conservative type of girl, the woman that wears the dress and maybe is quiet and maybe wants to take care of the household. And who's going to be attracted to someone who is essentially prey, a predator? And then when you just dismiss it as, he's a Christian, so it's okay. I mean, that's essentially what was happening in the early days of the spread of Christianity. That's not an exclusive thing. I'm just saying it's not like even a general thing. I'm just saying that there's certainly a little bit of that today, and there's definitely a lot of that historically. And they just, I guess, hide behind the Bible in that way, right? It's like, well, I did do those bad things, but I mean, I'm a Christian, so don't you forgive me? That's like a psychopath. And there's a ton of that in Christianity. And it's the same psychosis that you find in Judaism. Not all Jews are like that, but I mean, I've grown up in my life and had 3 or 4 different experiences with people that were Jewish, where they're the most self-centered, egotistic, totally psychotic, homicidal maniacs that it's like a TV character or a movie character, just simply because, like this guy in my film school class used to tell us all the time, "You want to go out to lunch? Well, I'm Jewish. Well, do you want to go to like it has to be kosher? Well, no, no, no. I'm just Jewish. Like, why do you have to tell me that every day? I don't care. Do you want to have lunch or not? That kind of weird thing. And there's a lot of that in Christianity too. and I'm sure there's a lot of that in Islam too. It's cult-like thinking, and it's very, very bizarre to me. But I'll ramble on and on, so please stop me.
Well, that's the thing is like you don't need someone telling you what to do in order to be a good person. Like that's what Neo Drifter was just kind of referencing there. Is like, yeah, religious folk want someone to tell them what they doing wrong. How about you be accountable for yourself, right?
That's what Jesus was teaching, precisely what he was teaching.
That's exactly what Jesus was teaching. And should Christians not strive to be more like Jesus? But that's a whole other story. But you should be a good person regardless of your religious affiliation, regardless if
Yeah,
you go to church on Sunday, Wednesday, every single holiday, it should not matter. Now, if you are a Christian, good for you. That's great. I got nothing against you. I have no problems with you at all. If your religion makes you a better person,
that's
then
right. That's the bottom line.
thumbs up. I'm giving you a thumbs up. You are A-okay in my book. But if the only reason that you're a Christian is so that you don't murder and rape and steal, like that's a
Yeah,
whole other story. You should be a good person just because you want to be a good person. That's the bottom line. I mean, that's the bottom line, bub. What does
that's
that say?
that's the bottom line. I think in with any, it doesn't matter what the subject is. I see somebody in the chat said that you see that in veganism too. It's like, yeah, you also see that in carnivorism. You see that in any group mentality, any group think ideology, or any group think zealotry. You find that same thing. It's a human thing, is ultimately what it is. I'll tell you, I have I don't subscribe to things per se, but I like spending more time around Buddhist institutions. You there's definitely a lot of places I've gone that are big Buddhist temples, and it's weird to watch like a monk, walk out of the temple and get into like a $60,000 sports car. Clearly, there's something wrong there.
Yeah,
There's like
he's
the
wearing a freaking Rolex watch and a
yeah,
cross made out of freaking
yeah.
gold or whatever, bro. He's all blinged up. He's got a freaking Apple Watch on.
I
I've
I
seen
went to
monks.
I went to one in Kyoto. I think it was a Kyoto. It was a Kyoto. No, it was South Tokyo. I went to one in South Tokyo. I don't know what, I forget the name of the temple. There's so many of them, and I swear that there was like a Mercedes, a BMW, and one of those Range Rovers that are like 80 grand. And I was thinking, like, I'm pretty sure that's, I mean, I don't it depends on, I guess, what perception of Buddhist teachings that you you adopt, but I don't think that's really, I don't know if that's really the acceptable in Buddhism. I guess you can interpret it any way you want, but
Hey, bro, they want their nut, bro. They want their nut and they want to eat it, dude.
yeah.
And hey, they got their nut. Hey, if that's what makes them happy, then that's what makes them happy. But
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
it's the same way with Christianity too. I mean, the mega churches. I mean, the Joel Osteens, all of those types of people
gross.
that are driving around in stretch limos. Have mega churches and the televangelists, which they're not that popular anymore. But I mean, that's pretty much what they. What was that one guy that was really a popular preacher before?
Billy
Well,
Graham, his son.
it was the guy that was like, "Ah, that's the devil."
Oh,
That's
that guy.
I forget what his name is, but
I forget
you
what
know,
that guy's name is too.
I think that it seems like in every type of religion, but I've met those Buddhist monks before too, where I actually seen a few of them in a mall. They were like all, with the Buddhist monk. What is the ceremony? It's not a ceremonial. Um, it's what they wear. What is it called that they
Like
wear?
their robes, or you
The
mean like
robe, the sheesh, or whatever that it's called. And they had like Rolexes on, and I'm like,
they have, Buddhists have prayer beads that are very similar to the Christian or the Catholic rosary too. Oh, actually, I have, this is from a Buddhist temple. I have listeners in audio form can't see this obviously, but this goes back to our Halloween show. I got this. I don't know if you can see that. You can probably hear it. I have
yeah,
this little gold. I did a whole show on this object. Some of your listeners probably watched that show on YouTube. I'm not trying to hypnotize you. I'm just showing you this because if you look at it real closely, you can see that there's 8 points, and those 8 points relate to the 8 parts of the wheel of the year that turns. So those are the solstices and the equinoxes and the midpoints between them. So we are coming around full circle now that it is the fall. And I got that at Ingyoji Temple in Himeji, Japan. It's actually where they filmed part of the Last Samurai movie. It's on top of this big mountain called Mount Shosha. I think it's Mount Shosha, and it's interesting. It's like 1,500 years plus old, something like that. I think there's some segments of the place that go back to the time of Christ, and you go up to this. We have to take like a bus or a cab, and then you take a cable car, and then you walk, and it's way up there. And I thought it was interesting because I was walking around and went to the furthest part on the mountain, the furthest part of the temple that I had not been to the first time I went, and I was reading about how the temple was founded, and I had not read this before, and I just thought it was so interesting because it describes two brothers or two beings, very similar to like Castor and Pollux. So the Roman city of Rome was founded by these two brothers. It probably relates to the constellations, the twins, and they have a festival in the winter on top of this mountain. They also have it in Hiroshima as well, at the Itsukushima Shrine. They have this festival. The point is these two characters. One is green, one is red, and they have a festival where they use pine trees. They light pine trees on fire, or they have pine tree branches, and they have this festival in the dead of winter. And I thought, red and green, pine trees, and like the turn of the year. That sounds eerily similar to what we call Christmas traditions. It's because it's the same symbolism. It doesn't matter if it's on top of a mountain in Himeji, Japan, or it's down in the water at Itsukushima in Hiroshima, or it's across the world on the other side of the planet. Like in the middle of the winter, if there's anything that is still green, that becomes a symbol of veneration. And it's pine, is one of those symbols, or those little red berries, one of those symbols. So red and green. Plus, green is also the green man. So there's a spirit of those crops, which are also little green men, which are, the aliens or the spirits of the fairies in one way. And then you have, all the other elements as well. You have the red, which is like the birthing of the new sun, the birthing, the blood. Just it doesn't. The point is, it doesn't matter where you look in the world. You find the same imagery. You find the same symbols because we're all human, and we all see the world in a very similar way. We just call it different things, different names. But it's all pretty much the same. That's kind of become my slogan. It's like it's all pretty much the same. It's all coming from the same place. It's the human. That's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and if we are all God, like the Bible pretty much says that we are all God. The kingdom of heaven is within. The temple of God is between your behind your eyes and in front of your ears. The what is oh shit, I just lost my train of thought.
About the temple of God, or about the nature of the God self, or
I have no idea. I don't remember, but I did want to talk about divination. I'll probably remember here soon.
yeah,
What was how is divination connected with Halloween and some of the older Celtic holiday of Halloween?
yes, divination is the primary focus of a community on Halloween traditionally, because we talked about the winter and the cold and the dark and snow and is this going to end, etc. And so one way that made people feel better and gave them hope was to perform acts of divination. Now, I understand that from certain perspectives, that word needs to be defined because most people assume that it means some sort of quote witchcraft or evil, or it's demonic and whatnot. the definition of divination to at least the Celtic peoples, based on the traditions, was primarily focused on marriage, but it was also focused on, making sure that the sun came back and the trees, and the plants and all that bloomed once again. So anyway, the point is divination was central because you've got a very, very cold, dark time of the year. Divination was central because the new year is starting on November 1st. So hopefully we can start off on a good foot. We can get up on the right side of bed. We can have our New Year's resolution. Divination was kind of like a New Year's resolution. And one of the central focuses, I mean, you find this again in any part of the world. One of the central focuses for women was marriage. You wanted to get married. So whether a woman sat in front of a mirror, brushed her hair, and hoped that her future husband would appear in the reflection behind her, it's an apparition, or whether people pulled cabbages or leeks. I think leeks were Scotland, cabbages were more Ireland. I'm sure the Scots did it too, but they pulled kale as well. And it's kind of like pulling straws. I don't know if whoever had the longest or shortest how that worked, but pulling this was like pulling lots. If you were
But
already
it's
married,
so fun. Like, I don't understand why we don't really have anything like that as a tradition as a whole. I mean, we kind of do. I
you
mean,
have apple bobbing, not for the same reason.
yeah, but we don't do that anymore. That was kind of more of a thing when we were kind of growing up, was like apple bobbing, like during Halloween, it was a big thing.
Yeah, I do
And then
think.
also like back in the day too, when we would use rose petals or whatever, not rose petal, but
Well, we
flower.
do this at a wedding. We throw the bouquet back. Some people still do that.
Yeah, that's true. We still kind of do that, but I mean, we don't really have anything that
Well, it's because
I mean, I
most of
guess a
the
fountain in a tank, flipping a coin into a fountain or whatever at the mall or into the water or whatever is divination too, right? Because you're asking for like a wish.
I think it's a little bit different than that, but it's it depends on how you view it. Because if you really like, I don't think anybody who puts a coin in a fountain at a mall. I remember when I used to do that as a kid too. I don't think anybody actually believes that the wish is gonna come true. It's just kind of a little fun ritual thing that you do. Maybe subconsciously people think it's gonna come true. So that's like hoping something happens. If you're practicing divination, that's more of a, yeah, there's a hope there for sure, but that's more of a trying to get some information about, like, if you're looking in the mirror, getting some information about what your potential husband might look like, or like with throwing the bouquet of flowers, apple bobbing, whoever can bite the apple will be the next to get married, or pulling cabbage or whatever. Or nuts were very popular, especially for men. You'd have like a nut, with I don't know, Sarah, and a nut that has the name, Cindy, and then you throw those in the fire, and if the one that says Sarah pops out, he's not the one for you. Little things like that. A lot of them are just games. So it's interesting that you bring the thing up about the fountain, because that's kind of like a modern divinatory superstitious game. But if you're living in a time when things are very dark and cold and you're exposed to the elements more directly, it probably wasn't so much of a game. But also because so many young people, young women's, in particular, young women were doing it, there is a game element to it. And games are part of all of the festivals and all the traditions we have. Even today, families get together and play games around Christmas time and stuff like that. So it's kind of a mix of, like, yeah, like a wishing well, a game. And I'm sure some people actually believed it in the same way that a lot of people might think that I practice divination. Oh, he's the occult guy. I don't practice divination. I thought about using the Ouija board, and that's not even always divination, but I thought about using that for Halloween. I haven't used it for years. Probably won't, though. It's
Have you never done that though, where like I did this a lot when I was a kid, which you're bringing this back into the forefront of my memory when we're talking about this. I would do like little things, like it could be like something really stupid.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
I would be, no, but I would be like, I would like I don't have a crumpled up piece of paper or whatever, and then I would
My
tell
eggs
myself,
just in the trash can.
then something is going to happen,
Yeah,
right?
I think everybody does that.
But dude, I swear, almost every time that I would hit it, like the thing that I wanted would normally happen, bro. Now that I'm like thinking back at it, how many other people have done that? Let us know in the chat if you ever did. It didn't even have to be like a trash can thing. It could have been like whatever. You could have been playing with like darts or like playing with your action figures. If I make this figure fall from the top of the TV and it lands perfectly on this little thing and he pops back up on his feet, then my friend is going to be able to stay the night. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, oh yeah.
stupid
If I
things like that.
if I make this green light, I
Yeah,
used to do that. Absolutely.
yeah, it's kind of a form of it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I know having grown up a Baptist, it was very popular. I don't know if this is a Baptist thing. I really don't think it is. Maybe it is. But I when I was, in when I was a kid and I was growing up around those people, it was really common for, people to open their Bibles and then just close their eyes and say, "All right, God, show me what you want me to know." And then just put their finger on something. I mean, that's the definition of bibliomancy. You're not looking for something, you're just, like, opening your Bible randomly, touching something. This is what God wants me to know. That's practicing the same thing. I don't even entertain anymore the argument. I don't consider it an argument at all. I just completely reject it outright. When someone says to me, "Well, that's because, the reason that's okay is because we're praying to the one true God, and all the other ones are evil." I just don't even listen to that anymore because that is a circular argument that people will have with you. It's not actually an argument. It's just delusional, and it's very, very silly to argue something like that. I know that's what people would argue, but if you put your hand on the Bible and say, "What does God want me to know?" That's a very similar thing to what we're discussing. But again, all these things is like divination. There's game playing. There's a lot of different definitions, but pretty much the same thing. But you're using a Bible, and there's no difference between. Think about this. I've used this example about the Bible before. What is your average Bible? Unless you have like an old one that's bound in leather, and if you have a leather case, take it out of the leather case. What is the Bible? It is paper, maybe some cardboard, and ink. That's it. And if you have little tabs that tell you what books, plastic. That's it. And what is a Ouija board? A Ouija board is cardboard, ink, paper with some glue, and plastic. They're just materials. It's a matter of what you do with them, which is another weird thing and another like double standard where you have like Christian conservative people that say, "Listen, guns don't kill people. Really bad people and Democrats and people on drugs kill people, and guns are just objects. You got to operate them if you're going to kill somebody." And then they're like, "No, the Ouija board's evil." Well, it's just an object. It's the same thing with the gun argument. It's just an object. Like this is an object. This is a keyboard. This is a Ouija board. You can use this as a Ouija board. This little keyboard I have. You can put your hands on it and just tell the spirits to tell you what you can. That's called automatic writing. You can use a Ouija board. You can use a pen. Are we supposed to get rid of pens and pencils now? Are we supposed to get that's like the I, I wish I was a comedian and could like write these things as like jokes and get the timing down because there's so many good lines here because you've got so many double standards where again like the gun argument and I could use the keyboard of the Ouija board as an example where you've got something that is just a tool. That's all that it is and it's a choice. Do I use it to type out a message to my friends? Do I write a letter to a loved one? Do I, post something on social media? Or do I use this to go to a website to learn how to make bombs? Or do I use this to go and look at pornography? It's the same thing. It's a tool and it's how you choose to use it. That's the only difference. In fact, if you read, I think it's the book of John, uh, John 5:19. I was just reading this last night, as a matter of fact. Jesus says, this is a quote for Jesus. It's in ink, red ink. "The Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does." What does that mean? Well, one, it's literally a child. A child will do what they see their father or their mother doing. But it's also a symbolic description. It's a parable. It's describing how the son or the soul, you can't do anything yourself, but the father, the brain, or if not the brain, consciousness, whatever term you'd like to apply to it, when you tap into that, that's when the son or that's when the body can start to do things. And that's when it becomes a choice to use this keyboard to, you know, look up Bible verses or use it to look up how to, make a bomb. It's all that's what free will is. That's the choice that you have. And the choice that you make is what determines whether it's, moral or immoral, not the device itself. Probably overstating the obvious, but
No, I 100% agree. And, I've never, maybe I have, I think I have played with a Ouija board one time, like a homemade Ouija board, I think.
yeah,
Like
you can make one.
we wrote everything on the back of a pizza box or some shit, like way back in the day. But I guess to wrap it up, like, I think we've talked about some paranormal experiences before in the past on the show. But do you personally believe in the paranormal and like ghosts and spirits? And if you do, like, what do you believe that they are? Do you think that they're human spirits? Do you believe that they're trapped in another realm and they need to cross over? Or do you think that they're on like some kind of loop track, or that is energy and they're trying to relive some sort of past event? Like, what do you think's going on?
That idea of trying to finish your unfinished business or work, that I found that that's actually a universal idea as well, so it's not confined to, like, paranormal discussions in the West or in the United States. That's a pretty universal thing. Over here in Japan, that's also considered what a ghost one not the only thing, but one thing that a ghost is supposed to be doing. But you're asking personally, like, what I personally think?
Yeah,
Yeah, what I personally think is this is how my mind works, so it might not be the answer that you want, but analytically is what I think. So when I look at like a ghost, I think from the symbolic to the scientific, what is a ghost? You think about the cold air, you think about feeling like somebody's watching you, you feel, these different things. And there's a scientific term for that. We can describe why the air is cold or why you might feel as if someone's looking at you. Kind of like that instinct when people would walk into a room and everybody turns and looks, there's like an instinctual thing. There might be a threat there. So there's a scientific explanation. And then there's like a symbolic or, a very baseline explanation where you're out in the elements and wind's blowing and it's cold and maybe there's a predator looking at you and you feel like there's a will of the wisp or some kind of ghost. You're in a place that's essentially dead and you go to like a place that doesn't have an abandoned hospital, I don't know, or abandoned house or whatever, like a haunted type location, naturally haunted because there's nobody living there. So it's not that place of the living, it's the place of the dead. So if there's nobody living, there's just the dead. Well, what are the dead? Well, it might be if there's no body, there's probably a spirit roaming around. I mean, some of that might have influenced the perceptions that Christians have of the Holy Spirit, even though the Holy Spirit is not really a ghost or the Holy Ghost that Catholics call it. It's more so the feminine part of you, which is really so the spirit. Like I guess you could say the brain is the father, the son is the soul in the body, and then the movement of that soul is the Holy Ghost, or that's the motivating force. So I think a ghost is like from a personal perspective. I think ghost is a lot of things, and I think that much like a ghost, I'll give you a better example that I'm much more qualified to speak on. from a personal perspective too, is like the vampire. So I did a whole show on vampires recently, and just like a ghost, vampires have so many different meanings and different forms. But there's a scientific explanation for the vampire, porphyria, which is a rare genetic condition where you have red stained teeth and your skin is very pale because you're sensitive to sunlight or really any light. And this this genetic condition is also passed down through families very directly. So if you look at the stories in Romania of the Strigoi, one sect of Strigoi, which are vampires, they feed only on their own family. So probably logically, whatever the vampire is feeding on its own family, and this genetic vampire disease, it's actually a scientific, medically recognized genetic disorder. It passes down through family, so it kind of people are feeding on their family and passing down this genetic condition. That's probably where that comes from. But then if you look at the Chinese version of the vampire, it doesn't drink blood. Instead, it directly sucks your chi. But then if you look back at the Romanian version or the other versions around the world, the reason that it's sucking your blood in those stories is because in your blood is the life force, which is also talked about in the Bible. So, like the Romanian vampires are sucking blood only to get your life force. The Chinese vampire is just directly sucking the life force and not even bothering with the blood. It's like cutting out the middleman. And so basically what we're talking about, I think, in the case of the Chinese vampire is what you have in New Age lore or New Age terminology, and that is like the energy vampire. Quite literally, that's what the Chinese vampire is. It's like an energy vampire. So there's different types of vampires, in the same way there's different types of ghosts, and there's a very scientific and logical explanation. And then there's a more supernatural explanation, and most of the time, I shouldn't say some of the time, most of the time, they're really one and the same, because it means that, yeah, vampires do have pale skin. It's probably because of porphyria. It might also be because they, maybe you're a person that drinks blood. There are some weird people today that do that kind of stuff, and they don't have a genetic disorder, but they just, like, maybe they're one of the, like that gothic couple from Portlandia. They just don't go out in the sun, so they have got really pale skin. And there's probably people like that historically that had no genetic disorder. They don't actually need to drink blood, but maybe they drank the blood of an animal, or maybe and they just chose not to go outside in the sun, and that started a legend, and that built on another legend. And there's always layers and layers and layers and layers and layers to these things. Ultimately, though, we can say that a ghost is real and a vampire is real. It's just a matter of how you choose to define these things. And funny enough, I think that, you and I, as people, are a great example of this, because over here in Japan, I'm like 6'1". I'm several inches taller than the average male. So over here, I'm, to a lot of people, borderline giant. But if you came over here, you're much taller than me. You would quite literally be a giant in the way that people used to define giants, which across Europe were people that were like 7 foot tall. Even 6'6" would have been a giant. And that's just like your standard NBA player. Look at that guy that plays for the Spurs. He's like 7'2", 7'3", and they said he's still growing. He's a literal giant. Is that the same as like a 25-foot tall giant? No, it's a matter of perspective. You could also be 5'1" and go visit the pygmies in Africa, and you're still a giant to them.
Yeah.
So it's perspective, and it's also, a cultural thing as much as it is a personal perspective. And so it doesn't, I know it doesn't, it's funny because for some people, that's not the answer, or that's not the description they want, but it also confirms the answer that they're trying to get at. And that answer is, yeah, ghosts are real, vampires are real, monsters are real, giants are real. But how do you define it? And that will determine how physically real it is, as opposed to how maybe metaphorically or symbolically real it is. I don't know if that does, but I hope that answers your question to some degree.
Dude, what if I came over there to Japan in this robe?
Well, I don't know if that would be weird because that's wearing robes and stuff you saw in the Matrix. There's some people in Tokyo that actually dress like that, so maybe it might not be that weird. I mean, I've seen some people dressed, like well in cosplay, but I've seen some people dressed and they look like Neo on the subways. So I don't know. Might
They'll
not be that
say,
weird.
"Holy shit, that's Lord Ashtar from the 25th and a half three-quarter dimension. I can't believe it. He's in the flesh. He's here."
It wouldn't be weird.
I'll start my Japanese cult.
It wouldn't be weird in Shibuya or Shinjuku. I know that. It'd fit right in.
Yeah,
Do
but
you have any other topics or questions or anything before we conclude?
no, I think you summarized it really perfectly. It's all about your perspective, and I mean, my perspective on it is that entities exist. I have encountered them several times in my life. I know that they are real, and people don't have to believe me, and people don't have to believe in entities, but I I've experienced them, and I personally know that they do exist and they are real. Now, what they are, I don't think anybody knows.
Mhm.
Nobody knows what they are, and if they do tell you that they know what they are, then they're full of shit because
Well,
we don't know.
there's like as I described, there's many different definitions for whatever they might be. There's a number of books that I've read. One was from a major US university, another one is from a guy he does a lot of Japanese translations, but they're books on yokai, which are it's Japanese for monster, but some people might know them as I think there's like probably anime shows about yokai, or if you've ever watched any anime, there's probably tons of yokai in them. The reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a slightly different perspective on things like that over here. So as opposed to maybe if you were talking to someone who's more traditional or connected to their roots in America, they might be more aware of or more interested in the subject of like spirits and ghosts and all that. But for the most part, that's kind of like a sterile, subject because of institutional religion, or at least because of Christianity, good or bad. But over here, like the shrines that are all over the place, and you walk through the Torii Gate, famous Torii gates, you're walking into the spirit world. So what I'm saying is that over here, like the spirits are all around you all the time. It's built into the society. It's how you view the world. Like every day is Halloween. They don't really do a lot of decorations over here except what's drawn out of, Western pop culture. But like every day here is Halloween in a sense because the spirits are always around you. In fact, we were watching Halloween movies, and my wife likes like you know, F Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers and stuff like that, and then she likes some really, really scary stuff. I'm like, "I'm not watching Smile or Terrifier." But we were talking about, like, scary Japanese movies, and I said, I said, "Well, what do you think scary, American movies or Japanese movies?" And she said, "Oh, Japanese movies aren't, you know, they're usually really scary, but she's like, American movies don't scare me so much because I know it's not real. But what our movies are, she's like, to me, like this stuff is real. Because most, Japanese scary movies are like spirits and ghosts and uh, you know, stuff like that. So like over here, it's a part of life every day as opposed to one time of the year. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a perspective on how people, view these types of things.
I didn't know you didn't like horror movies, bro.
No, I'm not a big fan of horror movies. I don't like, Terrifier and Smile, those types of movies. It's too much for me. I'd rather watch like a documentary. I'm not a big horror movie person.
Me too. Me too. I'd rather. I mean, but I like a lot of horror. I don't really like gory body horror, like Terrifier, those types of movies don't interest me at all. I don't like the gore horror, but a good thriller like Smile isn't that bad. I think that you might like Smile. Smile 2 was really good if they wouldn't have just ruined it at the end with all the exposition that they gave. Sort of like Long Legs, like they just explained the entire movie in the last 10 minutes of the movie.
I did like Long Legs.
But that movie was ruined because it was they instead of letting the audience put everything together, they could have added one extra scene in there and you'd have been able to figure it out by the end. But instead they had her mom blow the head out of the back of the doll, and then her mom's laying down on the bed and explaining everything to her in a dream, like the audience is stupid.
You know, I heard did you see that video of that I think she's a British actress talking about that recently, about why they're doing that in movies now? Did you see that?
No,
Oh,
but please
oh,
tell me because I would really like to know.
yeah, I've gotta send that to you. Hold on a second. I think it's on my X page. Yeah, this woman, I don't maybe she's super famous, maybe she's not, I don't know. But she was talking about, as an actress, why these movies are doing exactly what you just said. I'm scrolling through it right now. Uh,
It probably has something to do with people's attention spans, not wanting to,
yes.
sit down and actually watch the movie. They can't be immersed in the movie because film directors and it's, like, not immersive enough.
Oh, man, I don't see it, but yeah, I don't think I saved it on my page, damn it. I'm going to have to go and see if I can find it and send it to you later, but basically, that's exactly what it was. There's a name for it too, and I think they call it second screen syndrome. They're saying that a lot of movies and TV shows are having to do that because they know that people watching these streaming services, especially like a Netflix, they know that people are on their phone while they're watching it. So they have to simplify it. So while you're on your phone and watching it, you get that, the full description at the end of like exactly what happened and this is what this means. And yes, that's like a thing that companies are doing now because people are on their phones while they're watching the movie.
I mean, that makes sense, but it's like, well, why would anyone be putting on a movie if you don't intend to watch the movie? Like,
Yes.
I'm not gonna put on a movie or a TV show unless it's that I intend to actually watch it. Now, if I am putting on something, then I don't intend to watch, then it's just background noise. It's not gonna be something that I care about that's deep. I'm not gonna put on a documentary that I wanna watch just for background noise. I'm not gonna put on a show or a movie that I wanna watch just for background noise. If I'm putting it on, I'm putting it on because I'm gonna watch it.
Well, yeah, that would be the the logical way to assess it. That's the idea. But attention spans have, I don't even know if it's attention spans. It's just more like attention has been, diverted to other things, which is probably why you ever, I probably referenced this to you before. You've seen The Great Outdoors, right? With Dan Aykroyd and John Candy. Is it John Candy?
I
Yeah, it's
have
John.
not seen that movie, no.
Oh my god. Okay, I don't know if you like Dan Aykroyd, but it's a really good movie, and it's an older movie. There's just I can't, I guess, explain it to you because you've never seen it, but there's a scene where Dan Aykroyd's character is like this big businessman. He's very serious, very smart. John Candy's more like a family man, kind of laid back, kind of maybe lazy in a way. And as the business guy, Dan Aykroyd looks out over the place where they're camping out in this cabin, and he sees all the trees and the lake, and he talks about how they could have like logging industry and they could have toxic waste stored in the lake, and he sees just all these different things they can do with business. And then John Candy looks out and he's like, I just see trees. And I think that's kind of that's what's happening when you describe like the metaphors and the symbolism and all that. And people are like, well, I just see Jesus.
I just see the Bible. I just read the Bible and I take it all literally.
Well, it's like it's true. There are trees there, but you could also do things with those trees. That's kind of what's happening. I'll have to send you that clip. That one I can find pretty fast.
That's a really good analogy. But Ryan, thanks so much for coming on, brother. Really appreciate it. Could you let people know where they can find you online, where they can listen to your shows, plug your website, plug your speaker? Are you still doing shows on YouTube, or not doing any more video shows?
Just those Friday special, you could call them special edition shows for listeners. But that's pretty much it. Yeah, the main show is what you can listen to Monday through Friday. It is a new show every day, brand new. It is the same length every day because that show also airs on at least one other network as in a time slot. So you get the Monday through Friday show. The website is tstradio.info, tstradio.info. The email is rdgable@yahoo.com. And that is how you can obviously contact me. If you would like to get a copy of my Occult Arcana book, which it's like one page that has all the information we discussed tonight. It's a massive book. You can get a copy of that on the same website, tstradio.info. I think that's pretty much it. That's the website, email, the book. Thanks for doing the show. We could probably go on and talk about all of this stuff in more detail. If anybody wants more of this particular subject, I've got a whole bunch of shows in the archive. Lastly, I should also mention that if you want to go directly to the archive, just type in like TST Radio on Spreaker or Apple, and it should bring you to the show. There's a big eyeball, so it's pretty easy to find.
That's the Illuminati eye, bro. You're a Freemason.
Oh yeah, it's exactly the Illuminati eye. I just sent
Here's
you
another
the.
vibe.
Oops, hold on a second. I just sent you the link to the John Candy thing, and then I sent you the link to that comedian joking about the Bible. It's a really short clip. It's hilarious, though. I think it's what you're talking about earlier.
Cool. I'm gonna throw those in my watch. Facebook one's got an error on it.
I sent the link again to YouTube.
Oh.
That was my bad. What stops you from lying and stealing? Just the Bible?
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Sweet. I'll definitely check this out.
They're both short clips.
Appreciate you a lot, brother. It was an amazing conversation. Always enjoy having you on the channel, and the link to your website is in the description of this video. Just hit the more button under the title of the video, and then it'll give you the drop down. Got Ryan's website link in there, and all the links to all of my social media and documentaries is also in there as well. And please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And we'll be back on a weekly schedule starting here soon. So be looking forward to more of me. And thank you guys. Really appreciate everyone in the chat. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.